In this video, I'm going to have an Android app that uses Volley to read a JSON file off of the internet, and it's also going to use Picasso to get an image off of the internet. So I have, so this is what it looks like. I have data on Harry Potter movies, Prisoner of Azkaban, shows the information. I can go over to YouTube if YouTube will behave. And so then it's going to bring in a trailer. And then let's go back. YouTube being YouTube, you've got to work hard to kill it. And there we are back, okay, to our Android app, and I'll move to Goblet of Fire. Okay, so we are using, bringing in some sort of not normal Android Kotlin code, and I'm doing that in the Gradle, in the build Gradle, the module version, and I have these two implementations, one for Volley, one for Picasso, and then that would require a resync, which I've done. We are accessing the internet for that, for both the data and the images, and so in the Android manifest, I give the app permission, and then this site, which is sort of my site where I can put data, is an HTTP, not HTTPS, and so I needed this use clear text traffic equals true within the application. So then I move over to the activity main, and these three are all the same for, I'm going to show you two versions. It's the same, the Cradle and the Android manifest and the activity main XML are the same for both of them. And so this is, there's the spinner and then a bunch of text views and an image view and a button. So that's basically what we've got here in the XML layout. And then here we are over in main activity. And the file I'm reading here is not this one, but this one, Harry_Potter_2Potter.json. And we see here that it starts off with a curly bracket, and therefore that JSON starts off as an object. So when we use the Volley to read it, I'm going to say that I'm requesting a JSON object. And then in the other version, I'm going to request a JSON array. So because I'm requesting different things, the way I'm writing the code will depend on the structure of the data file. So right now I'm reading the data file that starts off as an object, and then that object has a property, which is an array. So I have to dig down to get to the array, whereas in the other version of the file, it will be straight out an array. Okay, so I have various comments for things I've shown you, what I did with the Gradle, what I did with the manifest, that I'm using this library, two libraries. I'm using Volley and Picasso. Okay, I have my usual connect the interface and code, and I have the explicit URL for the data file, and then another one. This is where the images are going to be, and so it's just a base URL for the images. And I'm going to make an array here in line 68. I'm making an array which will be used to load up my spinner. So it's going to be, I'm going to have this array of JSON objects, but this is going to be just a parallel array of strings for loading my spinner. And then I'm going to have my JSON array. But what I'm going to get out of Volley at first is going to be a JSON object, and then within the object is the array. Okay, so I have a Volley request. So I'm going to make a request and then enqueue, put the request into my queue. There's only going to be one thing in my queue, but nevertheless, it's a queue. Okay, so this is setting up for the Volley to have the queue, which then we're going to set up the object and then use this at the end, this request queue at the end after I set up the object. So again, this is I'm reading the file and started with the curly bracket. So it started with an object. So I'm making a JSON, I'm setting up a JSON object request. I'm requesting a JSON object. I'm using the get method. The URL I've established above. That's the URL of the JSON. I have a Response.Listener. And so I get the response. So this is assuming it works, then I get response is my JSON, which was an object. And then the films property is an array. So I'm saying from my response, get JSON array films. Now I have a JSON array. I'm looping through that and setting up my sort of parallel array of just strings. So I'm grabbing the ith object of the JSON array, grabbing its title property. They have title properties. And that is a string. And then I'm adding it to my films. Okay. Then I'm using films with my array adapter and setting up that array adapter as the adapter for the spinner. And the spinner, if you select an item in the spinner, then I'm going to toast out which movie you chose. And I'm going to get the director and the writer and the producer and the music and display them. So I've got my ith object. So when I choose a spinner, I get the index I as one of the arguments that comes down for this in this method. And then I'm using it in my JSON array, getting that ith object, getting the director string, the writer string, the producer string, the music string, and putting them in the various text boxes. Then I'm using Picasso, and this is the image file name, but then I also have to add it to that base URL. So I have my base URL I defined above, plus this image property of the JSON object within the array. And I'm putting it into the image view. And so I'm using Picasso for that because those images are not local, they are out on the internet. Then I have the usual, if you choose nothing. I also have a button and the on-click listener for the button. And this time I'm outside of the spinner event. So this time I'm going to the spinner and getting its position. And then at one time I was toasting it, but now that's commented out. And now I am trying to get the YouTube code, the YTC. I'm getting the YouTube code from the JSON array. And then I'm bringing up this new intent, going over to YouTube with that video after v equals, and then put in the code that will send me over to YouTube with that particular sort of Harry Potter trailer YouTube video. I need, in a typical Volley response, I'm doing an HTTP request, and so I have to say what I do if I get a good response. And all of that, the loading up the spinner and the spinner actions and the button actions, those are all dependent on my having a good response. But I also need to have an error to have a proper Volley. I need to have an error listener. And I'm just having a toast to say something went wrong. And so that was all setting up getting the JSON object, requesting the JSON object. But then I have to put that JSON object into my queue or nothing happens. So it's this one little line at the end that is simple to write, but easy to forget. That just says all that big long thing that you had before, use it. And then when you go out and you get those resources and when they come back, then you invoke the response. Or if you didn't get a response, the error. Okay. I'm going to just show you another version, which is going to read a different JSON file. So I used within Volley that I was getting a JSON object, and this file did indeed start with a curly bracket, and so was a JSON object. But I just wrote a different version of this, pretty much the same data, but this time the JSON Potter start square starts with a square bracket. So I'm getting an array straight up rather than getting an object and getting the array from it. And so I just wrote a whole different version of the app because the code, so I didn't write any clever code that discovered it. I just wrote different code because, based on the fact that I knew from the start that this file was reading JSON that was an array from the start. So different URL, everything else pretty much the same, but a different URL, the same base URL, it's the same images and so on. I'm still going to get I'm getting the JSON array, I'm getting the parallel array to load my spinner. Here's the request queue. But here's the big difference for the most part. The thing I'm setting up here is a JSON array request, whereas in the previous one, it was a JSON object request. And then I got the array from there. But this one, what I set up is the JSON array request, and then my response is directly my JSON array. So that was the big difference. It's just, pay attention to, if you have some JSON, pay attention to how it's structured. Are you starting off with an array? Are you starting off with an object? Because at least if you're following this kind of code, you've got to sort of get it right from the start, or it's hell to pay. That's what I wanted to show you on this one. Thanks for your attention.